Finally, I want to just sort of talk about some of the things that I'm sort of intrigued about to come next year in terms of from the manufacturers, mainly gear, cameras, things like that. Obviously, if you follow my buddy Simon, Ordinary Filmmaker, you probably are aware that in the first quarter, probably beginning of next month, we are probably going to hear an announcement of an R5 II, or at least a teaser of an R5 II, and possibly the long-awaited R1. So the specs are definitely interesting. I'm just sort of at this point of a wait and see. I'm really curious because based on all the rumored specs that have been coming out and leaking for months out of this camera, it's definitely exciting, but it also does put a very curious position on something like the R5C, where does this camera lie with that? And how does this and how is it supposed to line up with terms of that? So I'm very interested because it's like a lot of the things that are coming out about this camera, a lot of it is basically in the R5C, and I'm really curious to see what will be the difference be in it, and we'll see basically what this turns out to be. And then of course there's obviously the R1. That to me, while interesting, turns to maybe interesting in terms of video, and there probably may be some interesting things like a global shutter. But honestly, because of Sony, everybody just assumes because Sony put out a global shutter mirrorless camera that Canon has to follow. Not necessarily. Keep in mind, guys, these guys put these things in development for years. It's not something. It's not a situation where all of a sudden, another camera company drops some crazy feature that everybody talks about. Then all of a sudden it's like, all right, we got to do this in the next couple months. It doesn't work like that. Stuff like this takes years. So usually with stuff like this, you're probably going to have to, if it isn't in the R1, if it wasn't already based in the R1, the odds are that something like global shutter is not going to be there. And I don't think it's necessarily it's like a doomsday of like, oh my gosh, Canon just, esh the bed. Let's see what the actual camera comes out, what's its capabilities, and we'll see. For me, at least, in terms of Canon, I'm more curious about their cinema line of cameras, particularly what possibly could be the replacement of the C200 or some sort of camera that can come in to be a step above the Canon EOS C70. It's a camera that I absolutely love, but there's some features that I've like, if it was just there, it would be perfect. One of the big things for me is like an SDI port out, 2 video out sources. If there's possibly a 3.2 recording option as well, that would be awesome. If it could be full frame, obviously, yeah, that would be better. But to me, like the SDI thing was like a big deal, a second video source out. That was like the one thing that I was like, if the C70 had that, it would be like the perfect camera. But it doesn't have that, so maybe something like a C200 Mark II, or we'll see maybe something on the higher ends like the C300s and the C500s. So hopefully that will shape things up. In regards to Sony, I mean, obviously the big thing is the springtime when the Burano starts shipping. So I think that's the thing to sort of look out for in 2024 is sort of from Sony. How is the reaction of the Burano going to be when people actually get their hands on them, when actual working people get their hands on them and see it? I know a lot of people are excited about it. I'm excited about it, but there's some things that people like CVP have brought up with things like the fact that there is a big magenta cast when using the ND filters in this camera. So I am interested in the fact. There's also the fact that there is no open gate option, even though this is a $25,000 camera. So I'm not poo-pooing it. I think it's one of the most exciting cameras on there based on what this have. But there is some things that, I want to really be interested in learning. So we'll see about that. In terms of their alpha lines of cameras, or the only thing for me from Sony, it's like, when are we going to get in terms of video? When are we going to get a chance to use the full sensor readout? When are we going to get a 3.2 readout sensor on their alpha line of cameras? That's the thing. That's the only thing I'm waiting for. And potentially, arguably, what they may come and see with something like a replacement for the FX9, because that camera is long in the tooth, and I just that's due for overhaul. I just don't know I'm just curious to see what they're going to bring for that, especially given the fact that you've got the Burano sitting under something under the finish line. You got the Burano. Where does the FX9 sort of sit? And then obviously potentially what would an FX6 Mark II a little bit. So in terms of Sony, those are my thoughts. In regards to Panasonic, there's pretty much only one thing for me, and that is the fact is the BS1H Mark II, if that actually comes. I know a lot of people are excited to see the S1H Mark II. I thought it was a cool camera, but it wasn't great. To me, the big thing, I'm glad they figured out the autofocus. To me, there's two big things left with Panasonic that if they address, I think they're in great hands. One is dramatically reducing the rolling shutter. It is, now rolling shutter isn't that big of a deal to me because there's ways to go around it, and it's just about being cool. But it would be great to sort of find ways to reduce it. But for me, the big thing for them is trying to, one, move into better media, so CF Express Type Bs, so we can get full 10-bit 422, even in the open gate 3.2 recording options. That to me is the big thing. To me, the 10-bit 420 is a non-starter for me, especially given the fact that you got something like the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K that can shoot 12-bit raw open gate and gives you somewhat of little bit of frame rates above 30 frames a second. Even doing that in the full frame horizontal readout, you can do some higher frame rates. You can at least do double speed if you're shooting 24 frames a second. You can't even do that with the Panasonic camera, and this camera does it in 12-bit raw. So those are the things that I'm, in terms of Panasonic, if they do that, and I would rather have it in sort of like a BS1H style body versus the S1H, because it does have that two video source outs. I'll pay for a monitor as long as they can give me a little LCD screen that I can scroll through and helps me with the menus. It'd be better if it's touchscreen. But those are the things. That's pretty much what I'm aiming and looking forward to from Panasonic. And obviously, there's some rumors about the GH7. We'll see how that goes. So there's that. And then, of course, there's Blackmagic. Blackmagic, I think everybody's just like a redesigned cinema camera. But I think, more importantly, I think the simple answer is everybody's looking for the sensor that is in the full frame 6K camera in an Ursa style body at the very least, with possibly some higher frame rate options. I think if you offer that, I think so many people will be super happy, and it will sell like gangbusters. I think the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, sorry, not the Pocket. I think the Cinema Camera 6K is a great option, but to maybe potentially have that as well as the L mounts in an Ursa style body would be interesting. But I also believe that if they put the L mount in an Ursa body, they're going to probably have to get rid of the built-in NDs. And in a camera that's like the Ursa, I think that to me is more of a non-starter. It can work with something like this, which is designed more to be more handheld, so you can sort of work with NDs if need be. But in terms of the Ursa bodies, they got to have the ND system in there. So maybe they'll figure it out where they can use the L mounts on the Ursas. I would be interested in seeing that, but that's it for me. But this is it for me, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Let me know. Leave your comment below. And as always, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And until next time, take care, everyone.